Hi, everyone. So I published videos about masculine boys, raising masculine boys and raising feminine girls. And I got quite a lot of heat. A lot of it, actually, the vast majority of it was people just expressing their relief and their gratitude at kind of what they dubbed as common sense, right? Or just back to basics. A lot of people said, yeah, this is controversial and it's brave to share this stuff. I don't feel like it's brave, but people found my take on masculine boys and on feminine girls something that they seem to be, I would say, almost a little bit thirsty for, or almost like they were looking for that voice that could just kind of speak about it in a nonplussed, direct, kind of, I guess, I don't know, this isn't such a great word, but kind of normal way, or how we were used to when we were growing up and that kind of thing. But some people took issue with it. And I think it would be really interesting, not because you need to give, you know, extra attention to negative comments or feed the haters or increase the shade or escalate or anything, but just because I think it's interesting to contend with what some of the people are saying on these videos that they are getting upset about how to raise, masculine men or feminine girls. So first of all, let me know, have you watched the video? If you haven't, make sure to go and watch it. It's on YouTube. There are two, one about raising masculine boys, one about raising feminine girls. And I don't think, although I dubbed them as controversial-ish, I don't think they're hyper controversial. I don't think they're very extreme ideas. I think also what's interesting in this conversation is that it depends very much on where you live in the world and your culture around you. So obviously I'm coming at this from my perspective. I'm going to be sharing this from the perspective of someone who is married for almost 2 decades, who has 5 children, who 4 of those children are boys, who grew up in a household with 4 boys, but also who lives in maybe a different culture than most of my viewers. So I live in the Middle East. I live in Israel. I come from an ancient Jewish culture and religion. So those things talk in my head just as much as my modern voices do, right? I'm from the UK. I've lived in the US for many, many years. So Western culture, modern culture, whatever, democratic, liberal democracies, have shaped me, of course, my reading, whatever. Everything has shaped me like it shaped everybody else, right? Lots of different input. But my point here is just that I think I might come at this potentially from a bit of a different angle. Although I was really happy because I just got a comment on my girl's video where she said, none of this is controversial. It's all just completely obvious, right? If anything, it's generic. And I was like, oh, awesome, amazing. That means you come from a place where these things are always are considered common sense, right? Okay, so let's dive in. So Evie, hi Evie, wrote, I'm going to be that one commenter you knew you'd get, who says, what about how to raise healthy, sensitive, kind men? So I've made many videos over the years all about raising kids' character and generosity and charity and empathy and all of these good things, all of the kind of feel good, soft skills of raising sensitive, kind kids. Okay. And this is, I think, my first video ever, although I speak about it, inside my membership, about the masculine side and the masculine traits and the more stoicism and more strength, mental strength, emotional strength. Although I speak about that a lot for both sexes, I have never specifically called out this for boys, right? And she's saying, no, why are we talking about masculinity for boys? We should be talking about sensitive, kind men. Now, have you guys seen the t-shirts that say boys will be boys, and then it's scratched out and it says, no, boys will be good human beings or decent people or that kind of thing? And I think what this commenter is saying and what that t-shirt says and what a lot of the kind of zeitgeist says is that there is an underlying assumption that men are predatory, that men are violent, that men are aggressive, and they aren't healthy, sensitive, and kind. And so we have to kind of shape that out of them. Okay, so take a listen to some of the replies. I think they're really interesting. First of all, there's a few people coming to my defense. Thank you guys. She says, if you watch any of her other videos, her parenting style is basically catered to being kind and healthy. She already has that down, right? Another one says, this is a no-brainer, especially coming from her being me. right? Someone says, if you're the one commenter, perhaps it's not something that needed covering in this video. This video is how to raise healthy men. Overly sensitive men will leave on a whim, cheat on a whim, hit a woman on a whim, do what their feelings tell them. You don't want that. She's correct that boys need the things she's talking about, and what is healthy for women is not always healthy for men. But if you have ever watched her channel, you know your concerns are what the vast majority of her videos have been about. She's very much about connective and emotionally aware parenting. And I thought this was such an interesting comment to break down. Is it are they two separate things that we can either raise someone who's empathic and sensitive and kind, or we can raise someone who's stoic and strong and protective? I think that's an interesting question. And I happen to think that it's a non-duality. I don't think that this is a binary. I actually think this is something where you can easily have both of those things within you. Another one answered this one and said, interesting points about overly sensitive men. Thanks for sharing. That really has me thinking. I guess in your examples, they are men who cave into their fears and desires rather than tolerating them and choosing a path that serves them or others better and fit with social expectations. So why am I bringing this up? I think, and you know what? Before I go into this, let's just read another few of those types of comments. Okay. One person was rather disgusted, and I think that was interesting. She said, the approach of this video pisses me off. These features are useful for both boys and girls, but your idea of encouraging this on boys but not doing it on girls is just disgusting. So I think that is really interesting, because I think if I made a video about how to raise strong, independent women, which is a very popular idea, I don't think anyone would find that disgusting. I don't think anyone would find it gross that I'm just encouraging a particular sex. I think people would find that totally acceptable, normal, generic, great. But as soon as we give any attention to the needs of boys versus the needs of girls, there's this resistance, right? There's this disgust that she's expressing, as though it's unacceptable to talk about what boys need when you're raising boys. And what's really fascinating is that throughout the video, I actually mentioned that all of these things could apply to girls too. Like, hey, I was also doing martial arts, etc. But I just specifically want to focus for a moment on what boys need. And the truth is that boys are doing really poorly in many areas of life compared to girls. So are girls compared to boys. They're both not doing well. The kids are not okay. But there are many areas in which boys are doing worse. Boys commit suicide more often. Boys do worse in school. Boys are the ones who are going to be, facing much bigger dangers in their jobs, for example. So there are all sorts of things that we can focus on when it comes to boys that may apply to some girls, but are on average going to be less relevant to girls. She says, another person said something really quite interesting. She said, yes and no for this video. While many of the concepts are true, it's also true that men should protect us from crimes that men mostly cause. While discipline and self-control are crucial these days, I don't think that being a soldier is the best way to learn it. There's a bit too much military world and patriarchy for me here, which sounds like old times nostalgia. It could work well in some circumstances, but it's also mostly what shapes the world we live in. And I think there is space for improvement. So, hi, Carolina, who wrote this comment. And what's interesting about this comment is I'm not sure that Carolina realizes that I actually have been living through a war for the last year and a half. So it's not old times nostalgia for me. It's not theoretical for me. It's not this idea of potentially bad guys attacking you. It's literal in my life. Okay. It's absolutely literal and realistic. And I'm really happy for and slightly envious of all the people who are removed from that reality, right? All the people who are living in a reality where No one would ever attack me. There are no bad guys. If I just raise my boys to be sensitive and kind and gentle, then everyone else will also do the same with their boys and will never be attacked. There will never be bad guys. We'll never have war. That's not a reality for me. And so we'll just have, kumbaya and peace on earth. And that's such a wonderful and naive and sweet, but completely irrelevant perspective for most of the world. Like for most of the world, that's not true, right? They need men, good men, to protect them from bad men. And what I don't like about this comment is that it equates the protective men who are raised to be masculine in a positive way with the aggressive men who are using that toxic masculinity you could talk about, right, for violence and for doing damage to people. And those aren't the same men. It's not just a cycle of violence. It's not just, oh, these men hit those men and then those men hit these men attack those men's, wives and children, and then these men do the same to them. That's not what I'm talking about. That's not the reality that I've experienced, and that's not kind of the way the world works. It's like, let me give you an example just to drive this point home, okay? Many people say you should raise your children to stand up to authority because people who can't stand up to authority are the reason we had, Nazism, communism, whatever, right? People need to be able to speak truth to power and to disrespect authority. They need to be able to say no, because if they can't do that, then they might usher in, totalitarianism and dictatorship, etc. And what this point misses is that there's also such a thing as good authority, as benevolent authority, right? Not every form of leadership and authority is negative, is abusive. Not every form of leadership and authority is something that you need to fight against. So many people will say, oh, I want to raise my daughter to be, I like it when she's rude to her teachers, when she talks back to her dad, because she's a strong little girl and she has a lot of character. And wow, isn't this amazing? And I'm thinking to myself, 1 minute, we've lost all the nuance here. You've got to, I think, or I'm trying to teach my kids to be respectful and to actually be compliant with positive authority, and to stand up to and be disobedient to evil authority, right? If someone in a position of power is telling you to do something that's wrong, right? If a evil dictatorship is telling you to go and to go and do bad things to people, then of course you need to stand up to that. But your mom telling you to clean your room, or your teacher telling you to do your homework, or people who are benevolent, moral, good, who want the best for you, who are aligned with, the incentives of law and order, a policeman telling you not to speed, that's not the type of authority you want to push back against. That's not the type of authority that you want to rebel against. So kids need to learn about the difference between positive authority and negative authority. And I think this woman, Carolina, here in the comments, Carolina, I think you're confusing negative strength, negative masculinity with positive masculinity. So people think, well, we should just raise weak boys because then there won't be any kind of, predatory behavior. But what they're missing is that we need actually positive strength, just like we need positive authority, positive leadership. So I hope I'm making making sense here. Let me know what you think. But I think it's just first of all naive and sweet and it's lovely, but it's just unrealistic to think that, oh, if I raise my kids to be, we see this actually. You see this in lots of places where men have been raised in a weak mindset where they wouldn't fight for their country, where they wouldn't fight for their family, where they wouldn't stand up to evil, right? And that those places are left unprotected, right? Because there is a vacuum, there is a power vacuum that will be filled by people with bad intentions, with bad laws, right? With bad morals. So I disagree with that. That's first of all. And I also don't think that equating strength with something negative or with something immoral is correct. I think being strong is how you create peace. You see this in parenting in a really succinct way, is that parents who are very permissive, who have no authority, who aren't emotionally stable and strong, who aren't firm, don't have clear rules, don't have clear boundaries, don't have clear consequences, can't follow through. They are the ones that actually create the most chaos and the least peace in their home. There's constant negotiations and battles and screaming, and they lose their cool and they're deeply resentful and they burn out much more than the parents who have a strong, firm, clear backbone, clear rules and high expectations. Because when you hold high expectations and high boundaries and clear rules, you feel secure. Your child feels secure. There's no need to constantly rebel and constantly argue and constantly have, screaming battles, because there's a strength in, but I think the phrase is peace through strength, right? And we see that on the geopolitical stage, but I'm talking about inside the home, or even inside your own psyche. You receive peace in your mind through having a strong mental capacity, being strong in your mind. When you're weak in your mind, you become anxious and depressed, and you become chaotic. And that chaos is a terrible feeling, right? That's not what any of us wants, I think, inside ourselves or inside our homes. So to recap, I really don't like this assumption that being a boy or masculine traits are by definition not kind and not sensitive. And I want to just circle back to that first commenter who said, how to raise healthy, sensitive, kind men. I want to just explain to you and break it down, because I know a lot of people just don't know men like this, or didn't grow up with a dad like this, or maybe you don't have brothers, or maybe you haven't seen it in the movies because it's not well portrayed and not well represented in our culture. Men who are strong, men who are stoic, men who are emotionally stable, men who are self-sacrificial and protective, men who are willing to go out and protect their Garden of Eden that they've built, their wife, their children, their home, their community, their country, etc., are typically sensitive and empathic and kind, right? That is not a contradiction in terms. That is not a paradox. Those are the people who are typically going to be incredibly generous. They might not be kind of like, social and emotional soft skills of like validation and reflecting back things that you've said. And they might not have a strongly developed emotional language, although often they really do. And I just take it from me, because as I say, I've been living through war for the last year and a half. I know many, 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 many soldiers very, very, very well, very much up close and personal. And there is no negative correlation between being willing to fight for what you believe in, or to fight for the people you love, or to fight evil or bad guys, and not being sensitive and kind. There's zero. In fact, I think it's a reverse correlation. I think people who are strong and able to stand up for their belief system, etc., are likely to be much more empathic, seeing the other person. They're willing to sacrifice for the other person. They are thinking deeply about, their role in all of this and how to do it well, etc., etc. So it just doesn't follow. It just doesn't follow. And I think that that's where you'll find people who are actually very healthy, who are all these things that these people want: empathy, kindness, etc. Now, one of the more important, hi Tila, I live in Israel. One of the more important things about that as well is that there is such a thing as being overly sensitive or as being overly empathic. Gad Saad is just coming out with a book that I can't wait to read, called Suicidal Empathy. But this is a concept I've been talking about for years. You can look up my video from years ago about too much empathy. Having too much empathy, right? Or being overly sensitive, just like anything else taken to the extreme, it's actually going to cause damage to yourself and to your relationships. And our parenting culture has swung the pendulum so far to the extreme of empathy that empathy has become almost the only thing that we can see in someone, right? Oh, they just have to be kind. They just have to be sensitive. They just have to be empathic, right? You just have to validate other people's emotions all the time. You just have to constantly understand them and think where it's coming from. One of the things I see a lot in my coaching is that every single negative behavior that a child engages in, the parents' first thought that they're trained to do is, where does this come from? What need hasn't been met? Now, look, that's like a good thought to have. We should be a bit of a detective. We should think if there's an unmet need. Maybe they're hungry, maybe they're tired, maybe they're sad, maybe whatever. But also, you can really go too far with that. You can become completely paralyzed by analysis, this analysis paralysis of constantly trying to figure out um, constantly trying to figure out where this could come from, instead of realizing that sometimes people just make poor choices. Sometimes people have bad ideas. Sometimes people aren't mastering their moods. Sometimes people aren't being held to a high enough standard or having expectations on them. Sometimes there just needs to be a rule, and it doesn't matter what you feel about it, and it doesn't matter how sad it makes you. You just have to, buckle up and manage yourself. And it's interesting because another comment that came in on a video that I recently shared about I made a video about the fact that sometimes you just have to fake it till you make it. Like sometimes you have to just say the right thing or do the right thing, and you have to be able to pull yourself together. You have to have emotional stability. Now, this is something that I personally strive for in my own life in a very deep way, is to find and build emotional stability. Look, I lift weights every day, or almost every day, a few times a week, right? And I'm trying to build physical strength. I want to build my muscles. I want to have, strong tone and be able to, please God, one day lift up my grandbabies, right? But I also really focus on building emotional strength, not being overly sensitive, not being easily offended, being strong and stable and able to support other people in times of crisis and tragedy, which has been happening a lot, right? Handling grief, handling really difficult feelings without sinking into depression, without spiraling into anxiety. And those of you who know me know that I have a history of clinical post-traumatic stress disorder. So I'm not a stranger to any of these things, but maybe because of that history, it's so critical in my mind to develop mental strength and mental capacity. And the idea that you should just always err on the side of sensitivity, I'm not sure why that's a good thing. Like if you think about anything in life, if it's overly sensitive, right? Like if you have a fire alarm, that's great that you have a fire alarm. Awesome. But if it's overly sensitive, if it's always sensitive, then it's just going to be ringing all the time. And that's just noise and drama and chaos that no one needs. And if you're like, I'm going to raise sensitive men, okay, that's like one quality in a field of many others that needs, yeah, you should be somewhat sensitive to other people, but you also shouldn't be oversensitive. That shouldn't be your defining quality. And neither should kindness. Like kindness is fantastic, but you also need to be able to hold boundaries. You could do it in a kind way, but you need to be able to sometimes stand up for yourself, or you need to be able to be disagreeable sometimes. You need to be able to be assertive. Sometimes you need to just be able to focus on the mission at hand. Like imagine, for example, an emergency worker who's just only focused on kindness. Like, no, you have to make awful decisions. Think about these fires in LA now, okay? The firefighters there have to make horrible decisions about what to prioritize, about who to treat first. I only have a limited amount of medicine or a limited amount of water or a limited amount of bandages, and now I have to decide what to do. If I am just a sensitive, empathic, kind person, I'm paralyzed in that situation. I can't be effective. I can't help. I can't pull myself together. I can't focus on the task at hand. Okay. This is just one example of how being overly sensitive and kind and empathic all the time actually derails your ability to be functional, right? To work in the world. If I'm overly empathic as a parent, then every single time my child is, oh, I just don't want to go to school because it's hard for me, or I'm so sad that I have a sibling. Now I'm so jealous that I have a sibling, or anything that happens, their pet dies, whatever, like normal day-to-day human things, which are not traumas, right? They're just normal things. Then I'm just overly empathic. I feel so sorry for them. I just let them off the hook the whole time. Okay, never mind. You don't have to go. Here, I'll buy it for you, even though I can't afford it. Here, I'll do it for you, even though you could do it for yourself, right? I'm just weakening them with this toxic empathy. Tila, welcome to the channel. Stephen says, being solid in where you stand is different than being kind. You can be kind while making boundaries clear. I agree. Also, praising good behavior when it occurs. Totally. I agree with both of those points, Stephen. Mansi says, hello, Avital. My son's friend constantly blackmails him. Like, if you don't give me this toy, I will leave. I mostly just listen, but when my son sees his friend will leave, he immediately caves. I don't feel very good about it. Could you share some insight on this? Absolutely. So, by the way, Mansi, how old is your child? Okay, because age is going to matter a lot in how well we can coach a child like this, right? But what I would say is if a child is being pushed around by a friend, right? He's 4. Okay, so he's still really, really young. But it's really okay, even with a 4-year-old. You can pull them to one side and you can say, hey, Joshy is coming over this afternoon and I know you love playing with him. Sometimes he says things like, if you don't give me this, I'm going to leave. And I want to tell you something, sweetie. It's okay if he leaves. It's okay if he says he doesn't want to play. If he is forcing you to be a role that you don't want to do in the game, or taking things away from you, or making you feel like, wow, this really isn't fun and this really isn't equal, it's okay for you to say, okay, we'll play another time. And you can, right? It's kind of like teaching him that he's able to set a boundary. Now, if he doesn't want to, because he really wants to play with this kid and it's worth it for him, you should just know that in play, there are trade-offs. Kids do this, and it's a healthy thing to learn to do. Just like in adult life, there are trade-offs. If I want a job and I'm an intern, I might be willing to take minimal or no pay. I might be willing to run around making everyone coffees. I might be willing to, take some less than perfect treatment because I really want this job, because it gives me something. It gives me a leg up. It gives me experience. It gives me a recommendation. So the same goes for play. If I really want to play with this kid and he's bossy and pushy and he is saying I have to be the dog in the game, or I have to give him my car or whatever, then I might be willing to make those sacrifices because it's worth it for me to play. But what he does need to know is that he has a choice in this regard. And when people are controlling and demanding, if it pushes past the point of what he feels good about, it's okay for him to say, and this is where the kindness comes in. You can say anything in a kind way, that's fine, but you still need to be able to be assertive. And sometimes you have to be really disagreeable, and you have to be willing to say, okay, then I don't want to play. That's fine. Bye. In a nice way, you could say it, right? Like, oh, okay, Joshy, we'll play another time. I see that you don't want to play with me today. I really do want this car, so I'm not willing to give it up. It's kind of like teaching him the skills of negotiation and of trade-offs. There's always a trade-off. Then you might not get to play with that kid. That's okay, right? That's the price that you pay for setting your boundary. There's always a price, but there's also the option to make the compromise if that's what you want to do, right? Here's what Sarah said on a video about this idea of being emotionally strong and not following your feelings to the end of the earth. So I mentioned that I'm Jewish, and in Jewish folklore, there's this idea that your feelings follow your actions. Okay, that the heart follows actions. And in Western cultures today, it's all about actions following the heart. Like whatever you feel, that's what you should do. You should be authentically yourself. You should just do whatever's true for you, whatever's inside for you. And so Sarah says to me, to my video, she says, people have been so brainwashed to believe that what you are saying is actually true, but actually this is extremely invalidating and even toxic advice. People need to be able to feel and express their emotions to the degree that they need them to feel or express them. As long as you're not causing yourself or someone else physical or mental harm, then there's nothing wrong with being fully honest about how you're feeling. When you deny your true feelings, that is a betrayal of self. And if your foundation is built on self-betrayal, that's not good. If you have to fake support for your partner, I've got news for you, darling. You don't actually love them. This is what she writes to me, right? And further, I answered her, and she said, it's very important to be true to yourself, to be authentically yourself without any exceptions. But it's okay if you're not ready to hear that message, especially when you've lived your entire life with one particular belief system. Thank you, Sarah, for allowing that. But here's what I want to say about that. I think that just like empathy and just like sensitivity and just like kindness, these are all good qualities. There's also something that can be toxic and overdone if taken to the extreme with authenticity. Okay, this idea of just be your authentic self, never betray yourself, express your feelings to the fullest expression of whatever you feel inside right now. There's no such thing as wrong. And this is, I believe, a very weak stance, and also a very unhelpful stance in becoming who you want to become, in building a life that you want to build, in relationships that you want. And the reason I think that is because in every single endeavor, in anything you want to get done in your life, you want a good marriage, you want a good job, you want to raise children, you want a clean house, you want a healthy body, whatever, you're always going to have some feelings that come up of frustration, of upset, of hurt, of irritation, of I don't feel like it, right? And the key to I guess, success in these endeavors is to be able to overcome yourself in a way, right? Your true self, your authentic self might be, I could speak about myself. My authentic self is sometimes really lazy, is really self sabotaging. My authentic self is sometimes really snarky, is sometimes really mean, is sometimes really, kind of pitiful and self pitying and victim mindset-y. Okay. My authentic self is sometimes really judgy. I sometimes engage in all sorts of authentic cognitive fallacies, like I personalize things that weren't personal to me, or I make things seem permanent or pervasive. I make things seem bigger than they are. I might be really dramatic. My authentic self is overly sensitive, is hyper dramatic, is very emotionally volatile, and is sometimes quite hostile or sarcastic or rude. So, should I follow my authentic self? Is that going to be the best way for me to be the best parent I can be, the best wife I can be, the best business owner I can be, the best coach I can be? Is it? Or do I need to master my uh my more negative impulses, or my more base immature impulses? Do I need to actually master my authentic self in order to succeed in my life? So she's saying you have to be true to yourself, be authentically yourself without any exceptions. And I say, no, thanks. That's not who I want to be. I don't want to just be that childlike Avital, that immature version of myself that it's unable to control my emotions. Every PMS, every time I hear bad news, every time I get annoyed at a kid, I'm, erupting. I'm frustrated. I'm confused. No, thanks. I want emotional mastery and emotional stability. I want a bit more stoicism in my life where my emotions don't run me, where I realize that my feelings come from my thoughts and I can choose better thoughts. I can choose healthier thoughts. I can change my mindset. I can reframe. Okay. So when we're teaching our kids to just feel their feelings, I think we're doing them a huge disservice. Yeah, you can have your moment. Everyone's allowed their pity party. Sometimes their feelings just well up and we just have to express them. Sure, express them. Okay. But then we have to address the root cause of the feeling, which is a thought or a mindset or a belief, right? And that might be a poorly held belief. For example, your authentic self, your authentic child might think to themselves, I'm no good, I'm useless. I never succeed at anything, and no one ever likes me. Okay. So then that will make them feel sad and lonely and left out, right? Should we encourage them to just authentically feel those feelings and just authentically be themselves and just really connect to what they're feeling? Okay. Should you just express that? Or should we encourage them to, okay, you can cry a little bit, you can feel your feelings. And now, after you've had your pity party, we're going to put your big girl pants on and we're going to reframe that. We're going to look, is there real evidence for what you're saying? Do people really not love you? Is that a fair assumption? Are you maybe over personalizing? Are you maybe misinterpreting like we all do? Right? Are you maybe collecting through confirmation bias all sorts of evidence to prove that you indeed aren't loved by the world when the fact is that you are? Is it maybe not something that you should be thinking about that much altogether? Because we all sometimes feel like we're not so loved, and we all sometimes feel like we are loved, and really we just have to get on and do the right thing anyway. So, in other words, I think that this idea of just being authentically yourself, expressing yourself, being sensitive, being kind, being empathic, staying in that emotional turmoil and just letting it be and letting it out and making space and holding space, I think there needs to be a cap on it. There needs to be an expiration date. Like you could do that for a few minutes. You could do that once in a while. But if that just becomes your day, if that just becomes your character, right, that eventually becomes your whole personality. And that's why you see a lot of young women, and I will shift over to the girls video, right? A lot of young women in particular who are struggling terribly with mental health issues, right? This is mental health because they're volatile, because they never learned to strengthen themselves, to be capable of overcoming their feelings, of talking back to their feelings, of working through and moving forward from their feelings. Do you see what I'm saying? So let's move on. I made a video about controversial ways I'm raising a feminine daughter. And again, the vast majority of the comments there were comments of relief and kind of just, thank you so much for saying this. And it's brave to say this and that kind of thing, which is kind of, it's funny. It's funny to think that these are brave things to say, but I guess that's the world we're living in. And with that, there are kind of questions that come up, right? So let me just read. Here we go. One of them said, "Do I live in a bubble? This isn't controversial." Awesome. Like I said, part of this is about where you live and the culture that's influencing you, right? Like if you're not in a culture that maybe a culture that sees femininity as something very negative, right? By the way, I have a video coming up all about trad wives. You're going to want to watch that, and all about that trad wife stands for traditional wife. If you're not following the trend, and we'll talk about that there. But basically, I think the general kind of gist of the video that I wanted to share here is that many of us have been, I think, a little bit brainwashed into thinking that there's only one way to raise a girl. She has to be a strong, independent woman, right? And as I've said, and I've made videos about being a strong, independent woman and all of that. I mean, that's all fine. That could be part of it. That, we all need to be strong. Like I just said, we all need to be strong. We need to be physically strong and mentally strong. And I want that for my boys and for my girls, right? But I think what we're doing is we're ignoring the very serious ailments that young girls today are facing. Young girls today are in serious crisis. And all of the things that were bad when I was a teenager, like eating disorders, etc., have gotten so much worse. And one of the things I think is the root cause of this is actually back in the 80s. Obviously, social media has like lit it all on fire. But I do want to mention the self-esteem movement. Okay. The self-esteem movement started in the 80s and 90s, and it kind of peaked at the end of the 90s. And what it was some people analyzed the Maslow hierarchy, and they said, oh, the top of the Maslow hierarchy is self-esteem and self-actualization. So if we give kids really high self-esteem, then they will self-actualize and they'll feel amazing. So we just have to tell kids how amazing they are. And this is how we got the kind of participation trophy culture, right? Where kids are just praised for everything, praised for showing up, pure, constant, direct, intravenous, positive reinforcement, praise, and compliment. And the trouble with the self-esteem movement is that what we've learned is that self-esteem and self-confidence cannot be given. Okay, so write this one down. Okay, self-esteem cannot be given. You can't give your child high self-esteem. You can give them unconditional love. You can show them that you admire them and enjoy their presence. You can build a secure attachment with them where they feel, wow, I'm loved, I'm accepted, I'm whole, I'm valued. But you can't give them self-esteem. You can't tell your child, you're beautiful, you're gorgeous, you're smart, you're amazing, you're funny, you're courageous. You can't tell them all of that stuff and just think, oh, I'm gluing that in, right? I'm pasting that into their heart, right? That's filling up their brain. And now they feel those things. Because self-esteem is earned. It is only ever earned. It cannot be given. Doesn't matter how much you compliment your child. Doesn't matter how many times you kind of fill them up with hot air about how great they are. What you'll get is a very fragile, very combustible ego, but you won't get true self-confidence. Okay. And that's why, I watch some of the kind of Gen Z podcasts, and I see a lot of people talking about the dating market. And some of it's really disturbing stuff. But for example, they're often asking each other to rate each other based on looks, to rate themselves based on looks, right? It's like, oh, you've heard this before in the dating apps. Oh, she's a 6, she's a 9, right? Whatever. And you go around the table, and these young women, ages 20, 21, 19, whatever, are just each saying about themselves, I'm a 10, I'm a 10, I'm a 10. Everyone's a 10. And they're asked, okay, like normally you think of a 10 as something unattainable. Like even Victoria's Secret models aren't a 10. No one's a 10. But every single young woman today is a 10. Why? Now, it's disgusting to rate yourselves. It's a stupid idea. But why are they saying that they're a 10? They're saying they're a 10 because they've been brought up on the self-esteem movement that says, I should always think of myself. I should always love myself. Miley Cyrus, I can buy myself flowers. I can hold my own hand. I can love me better than you can. I just need to love myself. And if I love myself, everything will be solved. And if I love myself, my life will be perfect. And if I say I'm a 10, then I'm a 10, because that's all that's important is how I rate myself. And other people will necessarily reflect back to me what I think about myself. So if I think I'm talented and smart and sexy, everyone else is going to think that of me too, right? because my parents reflected that back to me, my teachers reflected that back to me, and my coaches reflected that. Everyone said, yeah, girl, you're a 10. And of course, all their friends are saying to each other, you're a 10. No, you're a 10. We're all so hot. We're all so amazing. Now, unfortunately, this doesn't just remain in the realm of body image, but it's also within the realm of character. Oh, you're a hot mess. You're always melting down. You're anxious and depressed. You're unable to get out of bed in the morning. You're unproductive. You're bitchy. You're rude. You're judgy. You're mean. You're great. You're perfect just as you are. You should never have to change anything about yourself. Self-acceptance, self-esteem, self-love. That is the name of the whole entire game. And the reason that this fails, and we all want our children to have self-confidence, yeah, but the reason that this fails is because you can't gain these things from the outside world. And if you do, they are fragile, they are superficial, they are short-lived, right? It's just a balloon. And once you suffer any kind of setback in your life, I got dumped by my boyfriend, I got, rejected, I didn't make the team, I, got cut from work, whatever. Once that happens to you, you are then going to be seriously shocked, and everything's going to burst, and you're going to sink into a deep, anxious depression. Because what do you mean? Why aren't you affirming that I'm incredible? And so here's the key with girls, especially, okay, because girls care a lot about how they're perceived by other people. Potentially way more than boys, right? Girls are much more susceptible to social contagions. They're much more susceptible to social pressure. They need to keep up. They're always comparing themselves to other girls. They're always comparing themselves disfavorably, favorably, whatever. That's what social media exacerbates. It's that aspect of comparison constantly, right? Of the goals. Do I meet the body goals, right? Do I meet the face goals? Am I doing my makeup right? It's all right. That's what girls are so obsessed with. And that's why the idea of self-esteem being given is dangerous to girls. And instead, girls need to earn their self-confidence through real life experience, through embodied experience, through practical achievements and gains and real life situations. So for example, I couldn't ride my bike, and then I was scared, and then I fell, and then I really applied myself, and in the end I rode my bike, and now I have earned the confidence that I know I can overcome a challenge. I know that even if I start at zero, I can make it to hero through hard work, persistence, trying again, etc. Now, my mom could tell me I'm an amazing bike rider till the cows come home, but until I've actually ridden that bike by myself without training wheels, I don't believe her. Okay, so I can just go around shouting, I'm amazing, I'm amazing, I'm amazing, but it doesn't help because I don't have the internal, decoded experience imprinted on me inside that I actually am capable. That's why the self-esteem movement fails so badly. Now, even worse than that, even worse than just the fact that it's fake and combustible, is the fact that it focuses on the self at all. And this is a point that I actually don't hear anyone talking about in psychology. Maybe Jordan Peterson talks about this. I'm not sure I've heard anyone talk about this, but I think about this on a really deep level as someone who's overcome a lot of anxiety in my life, which is this: the opposite of positive self-image. And by the way, let me know in the comments if you'd like me to make a video about this on YouTube, a full video about it, because I think it's such a key point. So if you're multitasking, come back to me here, write this one down, okay? The opposite of positive self-image, the opposite of no, let me put this differently. Sorry. The opposite of judging myself, of not accepting myself, of not tolerating myself, the opposite of disliking myself, okay, is not self-love. We used to think that, oh, if someone really doesn't like themselves, if someone's really not happy with themselves, we just have to teach them to love themselves. Just love themselves, love themselves, love yourself, accept yourself as you are, just self-love, right? There's so many songs and memes and coaches and videos about self-love, right? But the opposite of that, the opposite of hating yourself or disliking yourself or all the body dysmorphias and body image issues and self-consciousness and inhibition and insecurity and lack of confidence, the opposite of that is actually something else. You ready for it? Here it is. The opposite is not really thinking about myself at all. It's not being obsessed with the self. It's the opposite of a narcissistic, consistent introspection. Okay. It's that I'm busy just doing my life's work. I'm busy helping others, being productive, giving what I have to give, living out my talents and positive traits and best life and being helpful, being good, doing good in the world, being out there. It's being active, it's being productive, it's just taking the right next step. It's living a functional life that doesn't concern itself all the time with self, right? People who are always like this, always with the selfie, always with the mirror, always how does it look, right? Are by definition going to suffer from self-esteem issues because they're inhibited. They're constantly wondering, do I love myself today? Do I love myself today? How I ate just now, was that self-love or was that self-abuse? Did I love myself enough? Do I love the way I look? Yeah, I love the way I look, right? They're just constantly talking to themselves about themselves. And that kind of introspection, that kind of cycle is the epitome of anxiety. It's the epitome of inhibition, lack of confidence, right? So self-love and self-hate are the same sides of two sides of the same coin, and we need to just throw that coin out altogether and just not be so worried about yourself at all. No one's, people aren't thinking about you that much. People aren't judging you and wondering about you, and even if they are, who cares? It's just not a useful parameter. It's not an effective barometer for a life well lived. How I think about myself or how other people think about myself. Do I think about myself positively? I think about just stop thinking about yourself altogether. It's not about you, right? And we've made, in our ultra individualistic society, we've made our life so much about you, about you, about you. And I think it would be mentally health wise beneficial for our kids to think about themselves less altogether. Okay, so the questions that we need to ask them need to prompt them to think about others more. Okay, and how did you make other people feel? What did you give? What did you provide? What do you bring to the table? What is your contribution here? How can you, be strong for others? That type of thing, rather than just love yourself, which is, I think, like a poor substitute for a meaningful life. Self-love is a very poor substitute for a meaningful life. Just saying, I like myself. I think I look good. I think I'm smart. I think I'm talented. Great. And what? Now go out and do something in the world. Now go out and live a life. Now go out and give to others. Be of service. Be useful. That's what's going to make you feel great in a real way. Infant, hi. I agree. Praise being used to try to give your child higher self-esteem is a surefire way to give them a fragile, narcissistic ego, exactly, which benefits no one, least of all the child itself. Right. And praise where praise is due, give compliments where compliments is due, make them feel unconditionally loved, fill up their love cup. All of that is great. All of that is great. But self-esteem is only earned by what I do of service, by ways that I am actually useful in the world, or by fears that I overcome, or by skills that I build, right? By something that I actually can see with my own eyes, real evidence of how I've been effective or helpful or useful or contributing to this life, right? Sarah says, how much were our great grandmothers thinking about themselves all day? Well, exactly, right? I mean, I don't know, but I kind of think it just wasn't an issue in the same way that it is today. And of course, because people are building a brand and social media and comparisons and all of that, and the selfie generation, it's gotten that much worse. But that's why I'm saying the opposite is not just to love yourself. It's to just not be thinking about yourself all the time. Like, just move on from that. That's not a useful spiral. Okay. Both the self-love and the dislike is a spiral that takes you to a bad place really fast. Stephen says, a lot of my friends have moved to the gentle parenting technique, basically no consequences for bad behavior, just talking them through their feelings. Would this cause the same sort of issue? So yes, and I made a video about why I left gentle parenting, and I still love a lot of the gentle parenting ideas. I think it's really important to talk through feelings and to validate and to empathize, and all of that is really, really great. But ultimately, if there's no cost to bad behavior, if there's no cost to poor choices in life, if my parents, by the way, there is a cost, but my parents absorb the cost and hide the cost from me, then I never learn cause and effect. So for example, if I'm behaving in a really annoying way, okay, I'm throwing around a ball in the house, and the rule in the house is no balls thrown in the house. Okay, for example, Stephen, let me know if this makes sense to you. If I'm doing that and my parents grab the ball, and they come to me and they say, "Hey, buddy, are you having a hard time? Did you not hear the rule? Uh, I can see you have a lot of pent up feelings. You're feeling sad. You're feeling angry. Okay, right." And they're doing all of this gentle parenting techniques with me, and then nothing happens, right? And I then go back to throwing around the ball. I'm just like, whatever. I say what I say and I move on and throw around the ball. And they just keep doing that cycle. Oh, it must be these feelings. It must be that feelings, et cetera, et cetera. Then they are feeling annoyed. They are feeling anxious. They are feeling like he's going to break something. This is an annoying noise. I don't want the ball in the house, right? But they're absorbing all of that. They're doing their kind of breathing techniques and whatever. They're calming themselves down, putting a sugary smile on their face, and they're being like, "Hey, buddy," right? Now, here's the bit that I'm missing. If I'm being annoying, if I'm breaking the rules, then the natural consequence of that is that my parents are going to get annoyed. They're going to be irritated by annoying behavior. They're going to be like, "Cut that out. That's annoying," right? You're breaking our stuff. They're going to be that's going to be their normal, natural, non-robotic response. And I'm not going to be able to carry on. They're going to take the ball away. Okay, that will be the consequence. If they don't do that, they've absorbed all of the consequence. Like they're feeling uptight, frustrated, angry, like, right? But I never got the link. I didn't know that annoying bad behavior and breaking rules leads to something negative, and I shouldn't do that again. I'm like, do this again tomorrow. Everything's good. So that's the problem. You can do gentle parenting, but you do have to have consequences to bad behaviors. Okay. And like if I ruin a birthday party, I can't just get to stay at that birthday party. If I'm being obnoxious or having a massive tantrum in the middle of dinner, I don't get to just ruin that for everybody else. I need to be taught mastery and control over those emotions, and my parents need to teach that to me, right? And so I don't know exactly what you mean, Stephen, by gentle parenting techniques, but if that's the type of thing that you mean, then yeah, it would cause the same sort of issue, right? Because you just are never going to you're never going to be able to learn very critical lessons early on in life, that there's a consequence to poor choices, right? And it's a bit like with the self-esteem movement, is that it doesn't matter what I do, I'm still going to get the love. So I don't need to hold myself to any kind of high standard. I don't need to shape myself. I don't need to call myself to be better, right? Now, I don't know about you, but I'm not done improving myself. I think I have a lifetime ahead of building my character, of improving myself. And I would like my kids to have a similar sense of self where I'm valued and I'm unconditionally loved, but I'm not perfect. I'm not a 10 in any realm in my life, probably never will be. But I can strive and I can improve and I can work hard and I can master my, more kind of degraded base instincts and overcome my impulses and make better choices. And then I can become better. And that doesn't mean I'm not valuable as I am or loved as I am. I am, I'm lucky to have that in my life, but I still need to grow and overcome and build skills and perform better and improve and do all of those things. And so that's where I think we're losing a lot of ground with our daughters, is that they really need to learn that it's not about you. It's not about constantly loving yourself. It's not about the way you look in the world. It's about what you bring to the table. It's about building good character. It's about making positive, healthy choices and being held to account when you don't. And I think a lot of girls are being really, really weakened by an indulgence, right? An unnecessary indulgence in this kind of self-esteem movement, I guess, is what it is, right? All right, friends, we'll wrap it there for today. Go and watch the videos if you haven't yet already. Masculine boys, feminine girls. Let me know in the comments below what you agreed and disagreed with. As long as you do so respectfully, I'm really happy to answer them. And by the way, Evie, if you're watching this, just so you know, Evie left me a comment, which I didn't understand. And so I said, I don't follow. And her response was, you do follow. You're just trying to undermine me. So I'll say this to camera because that is an easier way to be heard rather than through text. But I didn't understand what you meant. I'm sincere in my comments. I'm not looking for escalatory fights. I don't do the whole like discrediting and back and forth and snarky responses and comments. It's just not my style. I'm actually interested in an honest debate and an interesting information. And if you have respectful and curious and open-minded commentary for me, awesome. And if not, like, this probably just isn't the channel for you. So that's what you should know. Okay. Yeah. Hi, Louise. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for being with me live. I will see you in the next video. Bye.